How is Ireland positioning itself at the forefront of the global renewable energy revolution? What does this mean for the future of offshore wind, and how are they leveraging technology to do this? Well, today I'm going to be joined by Shauna Higgins and Tristan McCallum from IDA Ireland, and they're going to be shedding light on Ireland's ambitious offshore wind ecosystem and its broader green economy initiatives. So I want to learn more about how Ireland is not just transitioning towards a sustainable future, but also creating a surplus of renewable energy that opens doors to new industries and new technological breakthroughs. Whether you are interested in the intersection of digital skills and green technology or the investment opportunities arising from Ireland's renewable goals, this conversation should provide some valuable insights into exactly how Ireland is leading the way in the energy transition. But enough scene setting for me. I want to take a time out to express my gratitude to everyone who supports my mission of delivering daily content to you in 165 countries. I couldn't do it without you, and I couldn't do it without my sponsors. So, quick shout out to any defence contractors listening out there. CMMC 2.0 compliance doesn't have to be a headache. Consider Kiteworks your fast track to authorisation. And as a FedRAMP moderate authorised solution, they cover nearly 90% of CMMC 2.0 Level 3 requirements. For you, that means less time, less effort, less cost. And while others struggle with DIY approval processes and clunky apps, you'll breeze through with their zero trust framework. So don't let compliance slow you down, is what I'm trying to say. Simply visit kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com to learn more about Kiteworks' secure content platform for CMMC compliance. But with my thank yous out of the way, it's now time to jump right into today's interview with a fantastic guest. Let's get today's guest on. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, good morning, Neil, and thanks for inviting us on your podcast. I'm Shauna Higgins. I work with IDA Ireland, which is the state agency responsible for attracting foreign direct investment into Ireland, with the ultimate objective of creating jobs. I've been working in foreign direct investment and international trade for the past 7 years. Prior to that, I worked in the private sector in the engineering, manufacturing and machining industry, and my background is mechanical engineering. I'm based in London as part of IDA's overseas team. So IDA Ireland have a network of 22 offices across the globe. I'm responsible for the engineering and green economy portfolio here in the UK. So as part of my role, I work closely with high growth, large scale climate tech, energy, engineering, industrial companies to help them scope out future projects and what they might look like in Ireland. And I also support our existing client companies to scale and grow their international operations. So for a potential new investor, we would provide kind of tailored information about the business environment in Ireland. We'd encourage companies to visit Ireland. I think that's so important as part of the journey. And IDA are on hand to provide the appropriate introductions, whether that's in the area of recruitment, finance, legal, tax. And we can also host meetings with some of the peer companies across Ireland to hear about their investment journey. I think it's really important to also link in with universities, with research centres, so they can share their knowledge and a little bit of detail about what work is happening in Ireland. IDA also have a dedicated property and regional team who are incredibly experienced in supporting companies to find the right location, right building for an operation to be successful. We also work with our existing client companies I had mentioned on their future investment journey. So that could be pitching for new global projects at the Irish site, expanding their footprint, and also engaging in research and development activity and skills transformation programs. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of the type of work I do. And Tristan, I might hand over to you now.
Thanks, Shauna. Hi, Neil. It's great to be here today. So my name is Tristan McCallum, and I'm a senior technologist for IDA Ireland. I work in the engineering division, which covers about 150 multinationals based in Ireland, who employ 225,000 people, 3/4 of whom are outside of Dublin. And many of those jobs, largely in manufacturing, that's the central piece to the role, like helping make sure we have high-value jobs that are fit for the future. So those 150 companies are across a diverse range of sectors that include automotive, aerospace and space, renewable energy systems, which we're talking about today, material science, electronics. And these companies invest billions into Ireland every year in people, in intellectual property, and talent and infrastructure. So I'm also a mechanical engineer with 25 years in advanced manufacturing, and I started my career in film of all places, building all sorts of strange things for film, so cars, robots, special makeups, rockets and aircraft. And over about 12 years there, I saw a fundamental shift in the industry, a convergence of digital technologies, visual effects, 3D printing and advanced machining, and one of the first digital transformations that I was to experience in my career. So I have a confession, I'm not Irish, but I came to Ireland as a younger person, and when I arrived, I had to find a new career to some extent, and that was scary and also exciting because it was all very new. And when I arrived, I was completely taken aback by the range of opportunities that are in this country. I named some of them, some of the sectors previously, but to add to that, there was advanced medical devices, which is where I went, metallurgy, pharmaceuticals. And as a technologist, my day job, I'm a technical expert. So I work with our client companies mainly on their research and development pipeline, maximizing the impact of their investments over the next 5 to 7 years. And I support Shauna and I support other executives on the technical components of the business they do with the companies we work with. And finally, I also support a bit of policy development. So I'm involved with several working groups that generate ideas that will help shape Irish enterprise into the future.
Well, a big thank you to both of you for taking the time out of your day to sit down with me. And every day on this podcast, I try to explore how technology is transforming everything from our work, our businesses, our lives, and even entire world. And that's one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today. And we're here to talk about renewable energy across Ireland. So can you tell me a little bit more about the importance of the energy transition in Ireland? 'Cause it's a big talking point all around the world, but I'd love to hone in and focus on what's happening in Ireland today.
So in short, in the next 10 years, about €310 billion will be spent on developing the offshore wind sector in Europe. And that number might be slightly up, might be slightly up and slightly down. It doesn't matter. It's just a massive opportunity. It's more than 10 times the size of the market today. Ireland is a great place to be based to address that market. So about half the costs of an offshore wind farm are in capital, making the turbines and putting them in the water. And maybe almost another half, 3/8 are in the operation and maintenance of that park over a 20-year period. And then there's a bit of costs in upfront development as well and decommissioning. But if the energy transition is going to work in Ireland or in Europe, the energy produced by renewables has to be competitive with fossil fuels. Otherwise, the companies that invest in producing it, like if they can't turn a profit, they've got no incentive to develop that infrastructure, right? And we actually saw that last year with the last auction round in the UK. The strike price was low, no companies invested. So what needs to happen is a way of bringing that cost of producing our renewable electricity down. And the obvious way to do that is addressing the capital cost, develop the manufacturing technology needed to reduce the cost of making a turbine. And Ireland has something to offer there. So over the last 20 years, we've seen turbine size scale hugely. In the early 90s, they were 35 metres tall. They massed about 500 tonne and produced half a megawatt. Now, taller than the Eiffel Tower, they weigh tens of thousands of tonnes and they produce 15 megawatts. So that's a huge rate of development. It's a massive escalation of engineering, and it's something the industry can be really proud of. But that development is driven by a really simple fact. The bigger the turbine, the larger the swept area of the blades, and the more electricity it can harness. And that maths works for developers because they get more power from a single turbine. And by installing fewer turbines, they lower their cost of deployment. There's a better return on their investment. That's why we've seen huge development there. But that design miracle has come at a cost. The engineering of turbine design has completely outrun the engineering of turbine manufacture. And there's a balance to be had. It's been figured out how to make turbines bigger. What needs to happen next is how to make those bigger turbines more efficiently to allow the OEMs and the developers the profit margin they need to invest in production while at the same time producing power at a cost point that suits the consumer and will actually drive the energy transition. And Ireland has a part to play there. About 1/3 of Ireland's production base is in manufacturing. It's really unusual in the country with Ireland's economic profile. There's a really good reason for that. A number of years ago, Ireland made a decision to be outward-looking on investment. They wrote an industrial policy that led to the formation of the IDA. IDA stands for Industrial Development Agency, and the previous decades have seen a marked increase in the type and the scale and quality of investments in certain sectors. We've talked about life sciences, semiconductors, automotive and aerospace. Offshore wind is going to be another sector. 2 years ago, our parent department, that's the Department of Enterprise, put together a white paper on how they plan for industry to develop out to 2030 that lays out a vision for Ireland's enterprise activity to be fit for the long term. And in it, two themes are called out: decarbonisation and technical change. To maintain Ireland's competitive proposition to continue to win new industry and new technologies, we need to be able to offer a sustainable basis for business, to be able to offer a confidence of long-term clean, inexpensive energy. The energy transition is key to Ireland remaining a place where companies continue to come to develop new technology and grow business. And it also represents a singular opportunity to build a new sector, like was done for medical device and pharma, like was done for silicon for tech. And there's a lot of work going into making sure Ireland creates an environment of investment to grow and scale offshore to access that €310 billion opportunity. Shauna, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tristan. I think sustainability strategy has gone from a nice to have to a must have for companies, and it's now playing a central role in future strategies. So of our 1,800 client companies, we've been working with them to develop climate action plans, and they can go on to support the adaptation and adoption of carbon reduction and renewable technologies. But sustainability has become a central priority at board level for all investors in companies in Ireland and across all of Europe. So of our 100 largest clients, 70% of them have now made net zero pledges. And commitments to sustainability can start from simple things like lighting upgrades, improving building management systems, the whole way through to implementing renewable technology. And in some cases, it's tackling those early wins, like early efficiency improvements, that will allow them to invest in future larger carbon reduction programs. And the appetite is certainly there. I read, I think it was a PwC survey that was done not too long ago. And I think they had over 90% of Irish-based CEOs were committed to making significant progress in this space. So the appetite is really there. And IDA is supporting companies each step of the way. We have a dedicated team who is supporting on decarbonisation journeys from areas in renewable energy across green manufacturing, certainly to talk about the life sciences industry, as Tristan mentioned. And, it's really clear that offshore wind is going to play a big role in this space in the future. One to even think of, like Johnson & Johnson, they're in Ireland for over 70 years. They have 4 sites in both their medical devices and their pharma divisions, and they employ nearly 5,000 people. But it's been really interesting to see. So over the last decade, they've invested more than 60 million in, I believe, 80 different carbon footprint reduction projects. And one of those is on-site wind turbines. So J&J are getting 100% of the power for its 4 manufacturing sites from onshore wind generation. And that's an off-take from a wind farm in Kerry and another in Clare. And actually mentioning Kerry, a Japanese pharmaceutical company, Astellas, they're getting, I believe, just over 60% renewable generation on their site. And they also use biomass. So the future is bright. You can see some of these leaders already adopting these renewable technologies in their transition.
And the world has changed so much in the last 5 years. And I think attitudes have also changed towards our energy use, sustainability. We've seen introduction of ESG scores, etc. And finally, the pace of technological change is just moving faster than ever. So I'm curious, over the last 5 years, what have you seen change in Ireland's offshore wind ecosystem, and what's happened recently that has got you maybe excited about the future as the pace of technology ramps up too?
Well put. I think we're really realising the potential of offshore wind and what that offers us as a country. Another element is I think we're welcoming it and welcoming the significant role that offshore wind can play in Ireland's sustainability story. So Ireland has a maritime area of more than 10 times the size of the landmass. So we put that in context. That's one of the largest marine areas in the EU. And by deploying advanced offshore technologies, the benefits of Ireland's coastal landscape can be heightened. So Ireland's actually made up of relatively shallow seabeds. So that's a perfect environment for placement of fixed bottom turbines. And then if you look further out in the tech landscape, the deep waters further off Ireland's coast are well suited for floating and that type of technology. So there's really an interesting position for Ireland and the access to potential wind energy development and deployment. So if you put into context the size of the opportunity in Europe, I believe there's nearly over 300,000 people working in the wind energy industry in Europe. So 75%, I think that is onshore, and the rest, 25% in offshore. And the industry itself has a turnover of 60 billion. And that can be seen back into the EU economy by about 65% of it back in added value. So if we look at Ireland and where we are today, we're at 300 wind farms, which is generating close to 4.8 gigawatts of clean energy. So if you look at that for wind installed power per capita, that's about putting us third in the world. So this comes off the back of a number of significant steps towards delivering offshore wind energy over the last year. And three things come to mind. So the first of this is our first successful offshore wind auction. That happened back in May 2023, where contracts were awarded to 4 offshore wind projects, and they had a combined capacity of 3 gigawatts. We've also established a maritime area regulatory authority. Thirdly, there was a publication of our first draft of the designated maritime area plan for the South Coast, as well as the future framework of offshore renewable energy. So together, these set a roadmap for how Ireland can create an offshore renewable energy sector of scale to achieve our climate and energy targets beyond 2030. I might hand over to Tristan now. Tristan, do you have anything else to add?
Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, well, if I was to add one thing, now that this is happening, the Irish are coming home. So Ireland was one of the first countries in Europe to put turbines on the water. There are a lot of folks in Ireland who went on to build really successful careers in offshore wind in other countries. They've been there for a couple of decades, right? And they've been developing global businesses. And now that this industry is really ramping up in Ireland, they're bringing that knowledge and business home. And that's really exciting.
And I love how at IDEA you're leveraging technologies to improve, to innovate and initiate new ideas that genuinely make a real difference to our world. And for everybody listening, especially our international listeners, Shauna, what do you think makes Ireland so attractive for international offshore wind players and indeed their partners?
Well, Neil, I think we always hear it. Ireland is a great place to do business.
Yeah.
I think as a company evaluating Ireland as a location, kind of three things always come back and come into mind is track record, talent, and the ease of doing business. And that can be seen just from the clients that are there. Like we have 1,800 client companies in the IDA portfolio, and roughly 30% of those companies have been in Ireland for at least 10 years. We actually have a number of clients who are celebrating 40, 50, 60 years of being established in Ireland. So their longevity has been key to that. A good example will be Lever, who have been operating in Kerry from their site there since the 1950s. And Lever container cranes are used in over 100 ports and 50 plus countries worldwide. So it just shows you the global reach that can happen and how that site plays such an important role. When you look at some of the investments we've seen in the renewable space, Scottish company SSE, they've been in Ireland for a number of years, employing over 900 people, but they own and operate a lot of low carbon infrastructure in the onshore and offshore space. And they've recently shown interesting partnerships. So they've partnered with Bord na Móna to develop some onshore wind projects across the Midlands. And the JV partnership is planning to invest nearly 1 billion to develop 800 megawatts of new energy projects. So when you look at that in terms of homes, that's potential power to 500,000 homes. So it's really interesting to see how companies can be developing in Ireland from their early stage development to then working with partnerships and deploying new technologies. And another company, Vestas, which is a Danish company, they're one of the largest wind turbine manufacturers. So they've been in Ireland for more than 30 years. And they've got about 100 people operating in Dublin, and they've got service hubs around the country. Another interesting one is Carrier Generation. So they're a specialist in offshore wind, and they're an arm of Macquarie Asset Management, and they're developing the Skater Rocks offshore wind farm off the coast of Connemara in the west of Ireland. And you've got companies that can have global reaches from Ireland. So one that comes to mind is GDG, and they're part of Venterra Group. and they provide global services to the offshore wind industry. So their central engineering hub is based out of 2 sites in Dublin and Cork, and they serve global markets from there across the Americas, Asia Pac, across Europe, and they've successfully delivered that from Ireland. I think another element as well, Ireland has been fortunate enough to be ranked first in terms of attracting and retaining talent, the flexibility and adaptability of the workforce. And I suppose when I speak with companies after they visited Ireland, the first thing they come back with is how impressed they are with the talent, the people, the skills. And I think that's on the back of some of the points Tristan mentioned earlier, but there's been a significant focus on education and skills. And that continues today, and is particularly across the key sectors: life sciences, financial services, advanced engineering, technology, business. And on the offshore wind side, Ireland benefits from some top-level training centres. One is Airgul's Training Centre. That was one of the first global wind safety centres accredited in Ireland. Another is the National Maritime College. They've recently invested nearly 16 million in their training facilities, and this is placing it as a top-tier centre of excellence in Europe and leading the way. So it's clear the track record, the ease of doing business and the talent is why Ireland is a great place to do business.
And one of the things that really stands out for me, and that I personally find really exciting, is seeing policymakers across Ireland are taking an active part in developing legislation and renewable energy goals. And Tristan, can you expand on this and what you're seeing here? Because from the outside looking in, it feels incredibly exciting what's happening here.
So I'm serious about developing offshore wind for the long term. Its goals are clear. So by 2030, there'll be 5 gigawatt of on-grid offshore wind development, with a further 2 gigawatt under development to support industry. And by most marks, that would be enough to decarbonise existing industry and have some headroom for the future. But Ireland's excellent offshore wind is a resource, right? It's an opportunity. So the plan is to use that resource to generate a significant excess to attract future industry, and to use that market, that offshore wind activity that comes along to put those turbines in the water, along with Ireland's engineering talent and track record in business, to attract really high value offshore wind operations to Ireland and to make Ireland a base to address that wider European or even the global market. There's a lot of thought being put into that. Not many countries in Europe are in a position to scale out a positive energy balance in the same way Ireland can. Historically, industrial activity has always been fundamentally tied to energy, right? Ireland's going to have an excess, so it's got a goal of 20 gigawatt, I think, by 2040, and maybe 37 gigawatt by 2050. Those dates aren't too far away when you look at the timelines these projects work to. But all of that is going to mean a complete restructuring of the energy supply. To make the most of that opportunity, there is a bit of work going on with policymakers. There's work to do to make sure that the grid build-out is coordinated with offshore wind development, that offshore wind development is managed in such a way to minimize development risk and to minimize environmental impact. And that along the way, we're not missing opportunities to develop a new green economy. So for me, aside from the targets, which are all about making sure we can offer an excess of clean energy, the most important policy parts that we've seen lately are the future framework that Shauna mentioned previously, and that outlines the planning-led approach that will be taken to developing the offshore wind resource. There's shaping our offshore energy future from EirGrid, which outlines the plan by the national transmission operator, prepare the transmission system for offshore wind. And there's powering prosperity, the national industrial strategy for offshore wind. So the first of those 3 pieces, what is the future framework? Well, Shauna mentioned it. Ireland has decided to use a planning-led approach and last year formed the Marine Area Regulatory Authority, or MARA. So MARA identifies which parts of the seabed around Ireland are going to be developed next, sets a schedule, and defines specific volumes of generation capacity, which can be auctioned off at specific intervals. This is all administered out of the Department of Environment and Climate Change. So I think Shauna mentioned the 3.1 gigawatt in auctions that have been awarded already. The next round will be in a designated marine area off the southwest coast. Why there? There's room on the grid. There's plenty of room for development on the seabed, and there is industrial demand. By identifying this area, development companies know where to look on the seabed. They don't have to spread their bets developing bits of seabed all around Ireland. that won't be capitalized on in the near future. Industry knows where to invest in order to maximize return. So let's say, now that it's been defined, there might be 10 gigawatt of development in the next 10 years in the Southeast. So that's now a sufficient pipeline for an OEM, a turbine manufacturer, to consider putting in a significant manufacturing center, be a blade factory or a powertrain assembly and testing point. All of that gives the local infrastructure like ports the confidence to be able to do what they need to do to support that investment, to build out their infrastructure in time to support this activity. And finally, and significantly, that future framework also opens a conversation on private wire, being able to send energy at scale to large energy users without necessarily using the grid system. And this opens up some really interesting opportunities for new modes of business, new technologies, and decarbonisation of industry in Ireland. So the second piece I mentioned, shaping our energy future, it's about the grid. And why is the grid important? Well, to take a broader view for a second, right? Like up until now, maybe not recently, but for the last, 80, 90 years, we've gotten very used to dispatchable power. Power we get from turning a generator on. It's regular, it's constant, and it can be easily dialed up and down a small bit as required. And that's really important because it means historically all of the equipment our grid is designed with assumes that power on the grid is more or less going to be predictable and can be lined up with demand. That's not the case within the wind energy. And Ireland's actually done a bit of work in the space already. We call wind energy and other renewable energy non-synchronous. It's not dispatchable. Sometimes wind blows a lot. Sometimes it blows a little bit. This being Ireland, it's always blowing somewhere. But the difference is that sometimes there's too much or not enough power on the grid at a given instant. And that means transmission systems, as they are now, they could break, or they wouldn't be able to deliver the power where it's actually needed. And so there's immediate need to build out this grid capacity in coordination with the development of the offshore energy supply. And so EirGrid, the owner of the transmission system in Ireland, is going to invest about $5 billion out to 2030 to make sure that happens. And I should mention, and as Shauna has already covered, Ireland does have experience in running non-synchronous power with 4.5 gigawatt of onshore wind, but they're literally doubling down on this with offshore out to 2030. They're building offshore substations, repurposing existing systems that were previously dedicated to gas-fired generation. They're making sure that offshore renewables will be connected directly to industry and consumers where it's needed most. And finally, there's Powering Prosperity, which was the title of the industrial strategy for offshore wind, and that's out of the Department of Enterprise. So 100% of Ireland's offshore wind could be built and deployed from abroad. And this document outlines the plan to make sure that is not going to be the case. This document lays out a plan that incentivizes innovation, that brings home the Irish expertise that has been developed in foreign markets. It lays out the plan for building industry forums and for knowledge sharing and clustering. It outlines the existing and future resources for research and development, the research needed to develop the technology that will let turbine manufacturing catch up with turbine design, to make turbines less expensively. That will allow OEMs to make the next generation of turbines at a cost point that will let them make a fair profit and also allow a competitive price for renewable power. And finally, the strategy identifies 3 offshore pilot sites and a new hundreds of megawatts, the need for 3 offshore pilot sites, and new hundreds of megawatt scale site for late stage testing, and a dedicated industry centre of excellence that will act as a hub for new research, industry development and skills. It makes offshore wind the topmost priority for industrial development in Ireland. And it does that because offshore wind happens on the edges of the country. It puts jobs in regions and in towns where otherwise they're hard to come by.
And listening to you there, I think the standout stat for me is the fact that Ireland is aiming to be one of the few nations in the world with excess renewable energy capacity by 2030. An incredible goal there. And I'm curious, what opportunities do you think will arise from these goals too? Because it goes much deeper than that singular goal, doesn't it?
It does. And at IDA, we're always looking at future areas of growth. And the 2 key areas that we see, it's the twin transition of digital and green. And wind and offshore wind are certainly a key component of that. So the ability to generate renewable, clean, green energy powered by wind, it just presents so many opportunities, particularly to be able to provide cheaper energy. And you'd hope that this is going to fuel new innovations, new technology deployment, whether that's new types of energy storage solutions, could be using hydrogen for some of the large-scale industrial users. I think another thing to consider as well is by 2030, we'll be in a very digitally enabled world. So this presents new opportunities in areas of AI, quantum, and semiconductor, advanced manufacturing. So having an excess renewable energy, it's going to definitely spur on a revolution that will be based on sustainability and green energy. Tristan, would you like to share a little bit more on your views on this?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I can offer an example if you want. So heavy industries always followed energy, right? So like coal allowed the Industrial Revolution. And the heavy industry of the future, or today actually, is digital. A nice example of that is in what we see happening in the mobility sector in Ireland. So it used to be automotive manufacturing, but that paradigm is changing, actually has changed from making a new physical vehicle to making a software-defined vehicle, a software-defined platform, a vehicle defined by the smart and increasingly intelligent software on it. So Ireland is home to several household names in automotive, and they're here for our software skills. And all of this relies on data. Their offerings, what they're developing, relies on data. Data centers are energy hungry. In the data centers of the future, the AI data centers are going to require somewhere between 10 and 30 times as much energy as those of today. So the data these companies, these automotive companies, use to teach their models that are the basis of their offering is absolutely central to their own intellectual property. So the mechanics of how it's fed to the model, how it's suggested, how their model's trained, how it's controlled, all of this is made so much easier for those companies operating in Ireland if their engineers can be sited where their data centers are. So having clean power available in Ireland makes it that much easier to secure the critical infrastructure that will then allow Ireland to continue to develop the resident artificial intelligence engineers and for the automotive industry, training data and developing those fundamental models. It's all so well aligned to our existing skill sets. And just having that available in Ireland is going to allow us to do so much more with our client base.
I think that's a powerful moment to end on. I cannot thank you both enough for taking the time and sit down and talk about the real difference that technology is making here and the real world impact that it's having. But we don't just solve real world problems on this podcast, we take. I also try and have a little fun with my guests. So I've got a few quick fire questions for you here. First of all, Tristan, I always ask my guests to ask if they've got a song that means something to them that we can add to the Tech Talks daily music playlist on Spotify. Guilty pleasures are allowed, no judgment. So what song would you like to add and why?
I've got one. So going back a while, when I first arrived in Ireland, I mentioned it was a shift in my career. It was scary. I wasn't sure, right? So I joined a great company, different city to where my wife was. My wife was expecting a son, was part of a small team developing a really novel technology, right? And there's a lot of working late. There's a lot of being lonely. There's a lot of stuff happening in the background, like we're trying to buy a house. And it's all very uncertain, right? And at night, when I was working late by myself, I used to put on a song and it was the same one. And I just get a sense that maybe it would all be okay, all the stuff that I hadn't done before. Not overwhelming relief or anything like that, just like some underlying sense it was all going to work out. And it did. And maybe better than I thought. So that song is called Feel the Lightning, and it's by an artist called Dan Deacon. And the album he released it on is Bliss River.
Wow, what a great choice. He's supposed to be brilliant live as well. Have you ever seen him live? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Every time he comes to Ireland, it is. For anyone who hasn't been to a Dan Deacon concert, go and dance with your eyes closed.
Oh, man. I'm going to put that on my bucket list. I'm going to do just that. And Shauna, I think for most people listening at the moment, we're talking about the pace of technological change. It can feel overwhelming. There's this constant pressure on everyone to be in a state of continuous learning. So I'm curious, where or how do you self-educate? Are there any tips or advice or just ways that you find that a little easier ways of doing just that?
I think, Neil, I'm fortunate enough in the work that we do, it's constantly challenging me.
Yeah.
So we work across so many different types of companies. They're developing incredible new novel technology. So I think that forces me to keep my finger on the pulse. I learn a lot through kind of news, white papers. I listen to a lot of podcasts, including your own. But I think a lot of my learning comes through some of the inspirational people I get to meet as part of this job. I have the fortunate position to engage with some of the top companies in the UK. Colleagues around the world get to do the same. And I don't think you could ever walk away from a meeting without learning something, become a bit more inquisitive about something. And I think that really fuels my hunger. I'm naturally incredibly curious, and I think that makes self-educating quite easy. But I think it's important to learn from your clients. It's important to learn from your colleagues and their depth and experience, your family, your friends. I think there's a huge amount of knowledge amongst us, and it's so important for us to share it, to keep curious and learn through each other.
Oh, absolutely love that. I think we get carried away sometimes talking about the technology and the shiny things that we can do. And I think it is being inquisitive, being curious, learning from every single person we meet. Absolutely love that. And for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about the work that you're doing, maybe they want to contact you or your team, is there anywhere in particular you would like to point them?
Of course. So always welcome to have any reach outs through our LinkedIn. So appreciate you sharing that. But any information to be found on IDA can be found at www.idaireland.com, where you can see links to some of the services we mentioned today, but also some of the recent success stories and some of the announcements that happen, and really get a flavour for who's investing in Ireland and potential for their company to fit there as well.
Thank you so much. I will get links added to everything so people can find you nice and easy and learn more about what we talked about. And we did cover a lot there, from the overview of Ireland's offshore wind ecosystem, the green economy initiative, sustainable development, digital skills required in offshore wind manufacturing, surplus capacity and investment opportunities, and so much more. So Shauna and Tristan, thanks so much for sparing your time and sharing your stories today.
Thanks so much, Neil. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Neil.
So, what does Ireland's offshore wind future hold? And how can businesses capitalise on the opportunities that it presents? I think, as Shauna and Tristan have highlighted today, Ireland is not just a participant in this global energy transition, but a leader in creating sustainable and an innovative future. And there also seems to be some exciting possibilities for new industries, from energy storage and hydrogen production to AI and semiconductor manufacturing and so much more. But as we reflect on today's discussion, I think it's evident that Ireland's strategic investment in grid infrastructure, policy developments and talent development, these are all setting the stage for a thriving offshore wind ecosystem. And for anybody listening wanting to be a part of this green revolution, the opportunities are vast. From the twin transition of digital and green technologies to the potential of cheaper energy that could fuel groundbreaking innovations. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about today. As always, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Send me a quick DM on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. And if you want to work with me, my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. But that's it for today's episode. We covered a lot there. And I've got another guest already lined up for tomorrow. So I'm going to make myself a drink, sit down and prepare for that interview right now. But thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.